everything just goes absolutely horribly wrong for Putin. Ukrainians are pushing hard near Bakhmut. It is only approximately 6,000 Wagner soldiers left. Russians are rapidly leaving Crimea. And even though all of this sounds extremely good for Ukrainians, indeed it will be the great test for them, which is going to happen very soon. But more about all of this in just a couple of minutes. What's up, investors? It's the Russian dude. And let's get straight to the point and see some more cringe material. And long story short, recently it looks like that Russian Z patriots came with their new symbol, how they can distinguish themselves from the public and, I don't know, maybe kiss themselves. But long story short, it is something like, I don't know, did I make it right? So yeah, let me know if you are also trying to make the symbol with your fingers, and if you do, can you please like this video. But okay, now let's get back to a little bit more serious news which are still infused with the Russian propaganda. And so recently, according to the press secretary of Russia Dmitry Peskov, he said for the second time that Russia is not planning to do a second wave of mobilization. And basically, yes, this was the second time he mentioned it, so maybe third time will be a charm. And after mentioning it for the third time, this is when Putin will announce some kind of a mobilization. Next, let's quickly talk about the loud noise which happened in Belgorod a couple of days ago, and basically even Russians themselves acknowledged that this was the Russian plane which accidentally dropped a bomb on its own city. But, I mean, of course they obviously could not acknowledge it as it is. That is why, according to the official statement by the Ministry of Defense of Russia, the result of this loud noise was the unforeseen detachment of an aerial explosive. And to make it even more ridiculous, the Russian propagandists started calling it, instead of a loud noise, they now called it a clap. And I mean, yeah, this kind of clap. This is what they called it, literally. And so yes, moving forward, if you want me to still keep saying a loud noise, can just please like this video, but if you want now me to use a clap instead, can you please subscribe to my channel? And also, the weekends are coming, so feel free to follow my Instagram, the link will be down below. Alright, and now please allow me just a couple more words about the Western military support to Ukraine, and then I'll mention some talks that Ukraine, in fact, might consider joining NATO in the very near future. And after this, we'll talk about the updated situation in the south and in the east of Ukraine. And so yes, first of all, the country of Latvia pledged all of their portable air defense systems Stinger to Ukraine. Next we have a picture of an armored personnel carrier BTR-4E, which Ukrainian Special Forces Spartan are using right now. Then we have the statement from America, which mentions that they will transport 31 Abrams tanks to Germany for training of 250 Ukrainian soldiers, and after the training is complete, some of these tanks, or maybe all of them, might be transported to Ukraine. And then, according to the representative of the Ukrainian Air Forces, Nikolai Alishuk, the country is already using Patriot air defense systems on its front lines. The next major thing that happened recently was that there was a Rammstein meeting in Germany, where the Ministry of Defense of America and Ukraine, Lloyd Austin and Alexei Reznikov, have also met in person before the meeting. And fast forward to the summary of this meeting, according to the General of the US Army, Mark Milley, approximately 8,000 Ukrainian soldiers have completed their training in Germany, and at this very moment 2,500 more are practicing right now. At the same time, according to General Milley, America at this very moment is prioritizing sending air defense systems to Ukraine, and the total collective support of the West to Ukraine is approximately 230 tanks and 1,500 other military vehicles. And in addition to that, very good news to Ukraine is that there will be a service center for Leopard 2 tanks, which will be opened in Poland, very close to the borders with Ukraine. And speaking about NATO, its Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg, who have met with President Zelensky recently, mentioned that the next summit will happen in Vilnius from July 11th all the way until July 12th. and President Zelensky said that he will be more than happy to attend it. And here's the good part: one of the main topics for this conversation will be the accession of Ukraine into the alliance. Just a couple more words about NATO, and then we'll talk about the situation in the east and the south of Ukraine. According to the same Jens Stoltenberg, he believes that Ukraine will liberate even more territories than anticipated as a result of this upcoming counteroffensive. And the reason for this, it is because Ukraine received enough support from the West, and by the way, this support will continue for as long as Ukraine needs it. According to the Minister of Defense of Germany, Boris Pistorius, Ukraine has all the rights to attack the objects on the territory of Russia as long as it does not target civilians, which basically means that at least one NATO country green-lighted the attacks of Ukraine against Russia. Alright, and now as promised, let's talk about the situation in the south and in the east of Ukraine, and why everything falls apart for Putin, and why Wagner is almost out of soldiers. But first of all, since it's already the weekend and maybe you don't have anything to watch, right here is another almost 30 minutes documentary about Ukrainians liberating its city of Izium. And since we have the ultimate counteroffensive of Ukraine right on our doorstep, it will be extremely informative for you to see how these liberations take place. And so in the future, you might see some very intriguing similarities. And as always, I uploaded this documentary completely for free on my Patreon, and the link will be down below. Alright, and now let's get back to the south of Ukraine. And according to still remaining Ukrainian authorities, Russians are rapidly selling their real estate in Crimea and trying to leave the peninsula as soon as possible. And according to them, there are two main reasons why they think this is happening. The very first one is that the potential upcoming mobilization that, as you can see, the Russian authorities are promising will never happen, which most likely will, judging by their statements. And the second statement is the upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive. So obviously, Russians who live right now on this peninsula, they don't want to be in between two forces. Next we have a picture also somewhere from the south of Ukraine, and this is just a genius. So somebody in the Russian army decided to use the fishing nets as the protection for the raiders against Ukrainian drones. And I think it is pretty much goes without saying, it did not work. Then we have the statement by the Institute for the Study of War, and it says that Russians continued erecting defense structures in the southern parts of Ukraine, and this time they started to do it more fast, because they are anticipating Ukrainian offensive very soon. Next we have a picture from Melitopol, and as you can see right here, another Russian driver who was given one single job to safely transport Tor missile system from A to B. He failed, and the combat machine fell out of the truck and was damaged. Next we go to the east of Ukraine. According to once again the same report by the Institute for the Study of War, Ukrainians started performing reconnaissance activity next to Svatove, which is yet another sign of an upcoming Ukrainian counteroffensive. And then Russians tried to do some limited offensive next to Crimea with no results. And then we go to the hottest spot in the entire country, the city of Bakhmut, where it looks like that recently the advantage is started to slowly change the hands. Because first of all, according to Ukrainian sources, they were able to destroy a Russian concentration of forces, their firing position, along with their military vehicles to the northwest of Bakhmut. As a result of Ukrainian artillery fire, they were able to destroy several concentrations of Russian forces to the south of this city, next to the railroad. At this very moment, the situation inside Bakhmut is still very complicated, but Ukrainians, besides doing defensive activities, recently they also started engaging in a small localized counteroffensive, specifically in the south of this city. In addition to that, significant fighting for the last several days has been reported along Khromovy-Chasiv Yar road, which is called the Road of Life. And this is just one of the few roads that Ukrainians are using to resupply themselves and bring in and out forces. And as you can see from this picture, this is the current condition of this road, or I mean, whatever is left of it. But then we started receiving pretty ambitious reports from the Russian side, such as, for example, according to the Russian infiltrator in Donetsk region Denis Pushilin, Russian forces practically surrounded Ukrainians in Bakhmut. And well, in response to that, the leader of Wagner, Yevgeny Prigozhin, he said that it is way too early to talk about the surrounding of Ukrainian forces, and those Russian military so-called experts are only creating additional problems about announcing such victories ahead of time. Shortly after this, Denis Pushilin was like, yeah, you are right. This fake information was, however, presented to me by one of my subordinates, and I'll handle it. Now you can see how some Russian authorities present their victories and how much trustworthy these claims are. But what is even more interesting is that such high Russian officials do not even want to take the responsibility. Speaking about Yevgeny Prigozhin, recently he also made another very controversial statement, is that as soon as this war is over, his Wagner soldiers are better become the security guards or basically anything else except coming back to the regular Russian army. Which just once again allows us to assume that the tensions between Wagner and the Ministry of Defense of Russia might have resumed. But then Yevgeny Prigozhin made another interesting statement, and basically what he said is that his 6,000 Wagner soldiers are the last hope for the Ministry of Defense of Russia in their offensive in the east. And judging by that, I think we can say that there are only 6,000 Wagnerites left. We will obviously never know the real number of soldiers recruited by Wagner, but some people estimated it to be approximately at 70,000, which basically means that 6,000 left shows us that the survival rate is even less than 10%. Just a few last words about the situation in the east. And first of all, as you can see from this map, which shows us the changes in territorial control, Russians were pushed further away from the front lines to the south of Marinka. And then right here is the video of a completely failed Russian offensive against Vodyane. Basically, in the beginning the tanks were all moving forward, and at some point every single one of them turned around, or I mean at least the ones which were still not destroyed by the artillery fire. The entire video is as always on my Patreon, and the link will be down below. I want to talk about another extremely important statement made by the ex-general of the US Army, Ben Hodges. So long story short, he also believes that the counteroffensive of Ukraine will begin in the next several weeks, and most likely, according to him, they will attack in the very narrow place, most likely somewhere in the south. According to him, the goal of this counteroffensive will be to breach the Russian defenses as fast as possible and then reach the Azov Sea, and the reason for this is to separate Crimean Peninsula from the rest of the land corridor with the rest of Ukraine. He also believes that Ukraine will win by the end of this year and most likely even liberate Crimean Peninsula, and America, according to him, will be able to provide everything possible to make Ukraine successful. And even though all of us we want Ukraine to win, or I mean at least 99.3% of us, according to my YouTube analytics, but long story short, this will be the grand test for Ukrainians, and it starts now. And why is this a grand test? Well, Ukrainian soldiers are being prepared by the West. The Western countries are also supplying the support to Ukraine, along with military equipment, vehicles and ammunition. The confidence of Ukrainian authorities about the success of the counteroffensive is extremely high, which basically means every single Western supporter of Ukraine expects Ukraine to win. And it also puts at the same time a lot of pressure on the country. But let's be honest, even though it will be extremely complicated, but Ukraine does have all the necessary tools to win. And one of them, which I have not mentioned previously, at least in this episode, is the morale of Ukrainian soldiers, which is significantly higher than the morale of Russians. And while Ukrainian counteroffensive might not be 100% entirely ultimately successful from its start, they might not liberate everything, including Crimean Peninsula, by this year, they will still be successful. I am almost certain that big territories will be liberated, and then slowly, step by step, the rest of the country will become free from Russian occupation. Because simply not a single time in the history of the world the evil defeated good. And I mean, yes, maybe at first evil could have won, but in the end the truth always prevailed. And the very same thing will happen with this Putin's invasion. And as always, if you want to see the total ultimate demise of Putin, can you please subscribe to my channel? It will only take one click. The best way to support my work will be through my Patreon, where at this point thousands of uncensored footage is waiting for you. You can also unlock exclusive badges by becoming my channel member or simply use a PayPal link. Everything can be found to the right and down below. Thank you so much for attention, товарищи, and see you on Tuesday.